like this quote. It's from St. Gregory the Great, because I feel like we experience this kind of paradox inside, right? So we can feel very close to God, but at the same time feel that he's far away. And we can trust him and at the same time anxiously wonder if he's going to come through. And we can experience like moments of light and consolation, and at the same time we can experience his darkness, right? So all of these things can coexist within our beautiful little hearts, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay. This is how it's meant to be. We're not in our eternal home yet. So there's our hearts that kind of can trust in God, but we're also anxious because we're human. And I love this, this whole concept of like these different feelings that we have inside reminds me of Advent, the Advent season, and the Incarnation, where this little baby looks down upon us and just kind of beams into our reality, our earthly reality, the messiness of our reality, and he just lives with us here. He just wants to be with us here and walk with us. So Advent is really like about making a space inside of our hearts for God, right? You know how Mary and Joseph went around finding a place. They're looking for an inn, a hotel for baby Jesus to be born, and they couldn't find one. There were no vacancies. So we're trying to recreate another experience for Jesus this Advent season. We're trying to create a vacancy in our hearts. He didn't want to have a vacancy to be born before, but he can have one in our hearts, right? And this longing of God to be born in us reminds us that we are actually, we're all called to be mothers. And in fact, we all are mothers. Like, I would say most of us probably are physical mothers here, but Lauren and I aren't, and I know that some of you have not had your own physical children, but who in this room has not given life to someone else? Like, if you truly reflect on your life, I'm sure that you would run out of fingers before being able to count the number of people that you gave life to and touched in some way and inspired and gave hope, right? Well, that's what it means to be a spiritual motherhood. So tonight we're not necessarily reflecting on how do we become mothers, because we actually are. We are mothers. It's how God created us. And I wanted to share a couple of experiences or ways that I've seen that Jesus kind of like pulls me into my motherhood. And, I just imagine that any one of you can kind of stand up here and share stories like I'm going to share tonight. My stories aren't special. They're not unique. They're just ordinary. And you all have your stories. But with these stories, I just kind of want to invite you to reflect on how Jesus is pulling you into your mission of being a mother. So I thought of 3 ways that Jesus pulls me into my motherhood, and it's through pondering, listening, and accepting and waiting. Pondering, listening, and accepting and waiting. So Lauren and I, we are part of a consecrated community. We're based out of Bethesda, Maryland. So I've been a consecrated woman for 27 years, so I've been out this for a little while. And so some years back, we had this like coach that was kind of mentoring our community and helping us communicate better and, work as a community and all of that. So I remember, he was having one-on-one conversations with us, and I remember he was having this one-on-one conversation with me, and I don't remember why this topic came up, but the topic of conflict came up, okay? And I immediately said, oh my gosh, I just hate conflict. And he's like, oh, well, why do you hate conflict, Mary? I'm like, oh my gosh, because it takes my peace away. I just hate it. And he's like, he was very pondering, and he's like, oh, so you decide to give your peace away in moments of conflict? And I'm like, no, I don't give it away, it's like taken from me. He's like, no, actually, you give it away. Like, you're free. You're a free person. You could hold on to your peace if you wanted to, but you decide to give your peace away in moments of conflict. Anyways, this was very like life-changing for me, because I actually didn't feel free in moments of conflict. I felt like my peace was being taken away. But he empowered me and helped me to realize I can make a decision to hold on to it. And so I chose this like word of like, this first word like ponder or pondering, because I feel like Jesus invites me to hold on to my motherhood, or draws me into my motherhood by helping me to realize I actually have options. And I can be a reservoir, and I can be a place of peace for others if I choose to do that. And if I choose to hold on to my peace, or I can give it away. And Advent season, you know how busy it is. It's like, how many of us, I'm guessing this probably happens to you. I mean, I'm consecrated and I even pray a lot, but it happens to me. It's like, what in the world? It's like already the third week in Advent. How did that happen? And I had all these beautiful resolutions and how peaceful I wanted to be. And I feel like I'm rushed, you know? But I actually, when I think about this, I can remember I can actually hold on to my peace if I want to. And then my peace can become a gift for others. So that's one way I feel like Jesus draws me or pulls me into my motherhood. A second way is by listening. So, I mean, we don't have time for me to tell you all my stories about listening that I've experienced, but I wanted to share one with you that happened actually maybe like 2 months ago, that it really helped me a lot. So we were in a community meeting, and it was an extremely busy week. We had lots of activities and lots of things going on, and different consecrated women were traveling. And so Lauren said, hey ladies, we have a retreat center in Bethesda. Hey ladies, we need somebody to give a talk at this retreat. So we're all like quiet, waiting for somebody to volunteer. Nobody was volunteering. And I'm like, oh. So I felt inside this like call, like, Mary, just volunteer. And I'm like thinking, I've got too many things to do, can't do another talk. And so I had inside my heart this like call, but then also this kind of resistance, like, oh, don't think I'm gonna have time. And so anyways, I just closed my eyes and I surrendered and I raised my hand, like, I'll do the talk. So that whole week, like, I had said yes, but I was still, like, I said yes with my voice, you know, my words, my lips. But inside, there was this like little resistance, you know, inside of me. And it's not that I didn't want to give a talk. I actually enjoy giving talks, but I was just so busy that I didn't see how to fit it all together. And I was stressed, okay? And so I'm like, the whole week I'm like, Mary, let it go. Just surrender, just give into it. So I go to give this talk. I had like 10 other things I had to do that day. And this talk, imagine, it was like at 8:35 at night. So I go there to give this talk, and at the end of my talk, this woman who's American Hungarian, and I used to work in Hungary for 5 years, so I was sharing some story about my experiences in Hungary. She came up to me and she was just like weeping, okay? And she said, I've never been to this retreat center before. And I saw this email, and something inside of my heart said, go to this retreat. God drew me to this retreat, and he wanted me to meet you tonight. So we obviously had this connection. Who speaks Hungarian? I mean, how many Hungarians do you meet? And I'm just like looking at her and my heart's just like on fire, you know? So we have this connection, and anyways, beautiful. And then she came to my house, you know, a couple of days later, and now I'm her spiritual director. It's just amazing how God put us together. But after that, I just was like pondering, I'm like, wow, Jesus, like that wasn't part of my plan. Like I had my week planned out. I didn't actually have time for that. I was experiencing this resistance, but that night I just realized, it's almost like I felt like there was this big curtain and he like pulled the curtain and said, I'm like orchestrating all these amazing things behind the scenes, and I wanted you to be this spiritual mother for her tonight. And he was like doing something in her heart to draw her there. So I think, like, I feel Jesus pulls me into my motherhood by teaching me to listen, like listen to him within me. And believe me, ladies, it's not always so clear. It's not like, oh, I know that's exactly what, you know, I'm supposed to do. And I hear God's voice and there's no resistance. And no. Like, there's oftentimes kind of mixed things inside. And we can feel a resistance, and that's okay. But just learning to like lean into him. So that was a second way I feel like Jesus like pulls me into my motherhood. And then the last way is, I think I may have shared this story with some of you, but it just like really like moved my heart and touched my heart. So it's like through accepting and waiting. So this was years ago when I was newly consecrated. I had just finished my formation. I was sent to Hungary, of all places, you know, and I didn't speak the language, and it was like really crazy. And I got there, and so I was doing my ministry, and I was working with these young girls. And it was Christmas time, so I always remember this story at Christmas time because it was right before Christmas. And we were planning this little outreach project. So I was with like 15 middle school girls, and we were going to do a Christmas play and bring Christmas presents to the school where they had underprivileged children. So literally, you know, could have been the language barrier, but literally the night before the event, I found out that this was a blind institute. I didn't know that in the beginning. I thought these were just regular kids who could see, and you know, so like, and our project is a Christmas play. Like, there's a problem. We can't perform our Christmas play because they can't see us, okay? I'm like, oh my word, what are we gonna do? So we had this missionary with us, and this missionary's like, oh, Mary, I can just play music for them because they can hear. I'm like, okay, well, that's a great idea. So anyways, we had to like shift all of our plans. We couldn't do our play. We learned some songs. And the next day that we went to this blind institute, and they were these little children. There were about 15 children in the room too. So precious. They were like 7, 8 years old, all blind. And they had in front of them this little Braille machine, okay? So I don't know, I can't even like paint for you the picture of my experience that day. It was probably one of the most beautiful experiences that I've had, because I was just standing back, and all of our girls kind of like paired up with each one of these blind children. And there was a lot of peace in the room, and they were like, our girls were trying to get to know like their blind child, okay? So they were sitting next to each other, and the little blind kids with these smiles were like taking their hands and like touching their faces and their noses, and they were exploring them. They were like trying to get to know them through touch. And there was like this gentleness and this like kind of like eagerness of like, I want to know you. And it was like on both ends. And then our girls had brought them gifts, so they would open the gifts, and then our girls are like trying to describe the gifts, and like all these things were being pulled out of them, of like they wanted this little blind child to receive the gift and to know what it was, and to. So what I learned from that experience, and then they even taught our girls how to type with Braille. That experience was way better because those children were blind. It was actually because of the darkness that we all had a more profound experience that day. Had we just performed our play and they could see us, it would have been different. But it taught me something about a relationship with God. When we're in darkness and we can't see God, normally we can't see him with our eyes, but sometimes we can, if we're in moments of like light or consolation, we can like feel him in our hearts, right? But when we don't have any of that and we're just in darkness and we have to kind of like explore God, and find him and find new ways to connect with him, because we can't connect with him in the old ways that we used to be able to connect with him in our prayer. Something beautiful happens in the relationship. A deeper connection takes place. So darkness is actually like a really beautiful thing. Even though it's scary, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. God does amazing things in darkness. And then I'll end with this last experience of darkness that I had. This was last year. Lauren and I went to California. I'm from California, and we do an 8-day retreat every year, a silent retreat. So we were doing our retreat at the retreat center there in San Jose, California. And one night, it was like halfway through our retreat, we had adoration. And there was this man that was there, and he was singing for us, okay? And playing his guitar, and his voice was incredible. And he was this amazing guitarist. And so I was just like looking at him and watching him, and Jesus was there, and he was actually blind. And I was just like pondering him. I was like, he can't, he has to memorize all of these songs and all the words to the songs, and he has to memorize all the notes. Like everything has to be like embedded in his heart, because he can't see. He has to do everything from his heart, because that's what he has. So I didn't at the time know his whole story, but after the retreat, he shared with me his story. And imagine, okay, when he was a little baby, I can't remember if he was 3 months old or 6 months old, but it was around Christmas time again, and his mom was driving. I don't remember who else was in the car, but their car was hit by a drunk driver. And because it was hit by a drunk driver, that's why he became blind. So that, that moment, his sight was taken from him. He was born being able to see. So through his childhood and upbringing, this blindness has been like a terrible cross, as you can imagine. And he experienced like being bullied and not fitting in, and just pain and struggle, not being able to see. And in his mind, like in his heart, obviously his parents told him, you're blind because a drunk driver hit our car and you lost your sight. So he struggled with that, with like anger and resentment, and just battled with that for years. Okay, so he's around, and he's in his late 30s now. He's married. And so maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, one day, this man called him on his cell phone. And he realized, I have a missed call from this person. He didn't know who it was. So he decided to call this person back. And this person was the son of the drunk driver who hit him. The drunk driver hit this, man's father, had already passed away. And he found this guy, Earl. And guess how he found him? He was reading it's crazy. He was reading the newspaper one day, and he was reading about this man, Earl, who lost his sight, and how he lost his sight, and now he's this musician, and how he brings like so much joy to the world through his music. And he was like putting things together. He's like, I remember my mom saying that my dad was drunk driving and hit someone, and a little baby lost their sight. And he was putting everything together in the dates. And that's how they found each other. So he called him, And Earl, who had already been through kind of like a healing process, when this man called him and he told him who he was, he said, I just want to, this was Earl, the blind man, I just want to stop you right here. I want you to know that I have already forgiven your father. I've already forgiven him. I'm already forgiven him, so I just need to say that right from the start. So they had this amazing, beautiful conversation, and they're friends now. And Earl was telling me, he's like, Mary, my blindness has actually been a gift. I came to know God because I had to wrestle through all this messiness to find him and to come to this place of forgiveness. And I've totally forgiven him. Totally forgiven him. I don't carry any burden in my heart. And I didn't know all of this, but when I was sitting there, listening to him play during my retreat in adoration, I was just thinking, wow, it's almost like a gift that he's blind. Because he knows all these things in his heart. He gets to carry all these things in his heart and memorize everything in his heart. I almost felt like a little bit of jealousy. Isn't that so strange? Even though I value my sight so much. But I'm like, it's actually a gift that he's blind. And he told me that it's a gift that I'm blind. And then I experienced that his blindness was a gift for me. So he's not, Earl shared with me more like his, wasn't like a spiritual motherhood, but a spiritual fatherhood. So acceptance, and Earl had to wait. He's 38 years old or 40 years old, and he just had his conversion maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He was struggling for a long time. He had to wait on God to reveal himself to him and to free his heart from resentment and anger and everything that he experienced from this man taking away his sight. He did it by accident, but he took away his sight. So we're all mothers here. We're all called to give life, right? We're all, we all give life every day. So through these little invitations here tonight of pondering and listening and accepting and waiting, I invite you, just like I invite myself, to really believe that God works through us in a powerful way, even when we don't see it or we don't know it. And I think Advent is just about being human and letting him pull us into his divine life. So with that, I think we're going to have another song.